Okay, so like I said, this tutorial is based on the work of Kareem Khalifa. He's got an open access online textbook called The Art of Argument. I linked to it on the Moodle page. You can find it there. So what's the point of reconstructing arguments? An argument reconstruction serves two primary functions. First, it presents the argument structure as clearly as possible. So as you know, in reading philosophy, it's not always clear what point is being made. And an argument reconstruction makes that crystal clear. The second purpose of reconstructing arguments is to present the argument so that it is as plausible as possible. So you want to show the argument in the clearest form it can take and also in the most plausible form it can take. Why do you want to make it plausible as possible? Because you want to make sure you're not straw manning this argument that you're working with. You want it to be as strong as possible if you're going to criticize it, so that you show that you have defeated the strongest version of the argument. And you want to make it as strong as possible if you're going to use it as part of your own overall argument. So either way, make it as clear as possible and make it as plausible as possible. The benefits of argument reconstruction are many. There's a lot of things that it helps you do. It improves your understanding of a text enormously, because after you've reconstructed an argument in the text, you have really worked through what it is that the author is trying to say. It makes it easier to see the strength and weaknesses of a view. That's because an argument reconstruction isolates different premises that you can then evaluate independently. So if there's a weak premise in an author's argument, you can isolate it and show why it's weak. It also demonstrates intellectual respect to your opponents, shows that you've really taken time to think about what it is that they're trying to do and what they want to say with the argument they're making. It also allows you to condense and clearly present an enormous amount of information. So sometimes there'll be a whole critical literature on a subject where people are more or less making the same argument. So you can take, sometimes like 20 or 30 papers and say, well, we can sum up what these people are arguing basically just in these terms. And so then your argument reconstruction is serving as a stand-in for this whole literature that you've familiarized yourself with. It also is fantastic for giving your own writing structure and purpose. So, for example, if you start out a paper with an argument reconstruction, you then have something to work with. So you reconstruct the argument, and then you say, for example, identify a premise that you think is weak. And then you can raise objections to that premise. And then you can answer those objections. Basically, what I'm saying is, once you have an argument reconstruction, you have something that you can work with as a philosopher. And so just in virtue of having that argument reconstruction, you have something that you can use to generate momentum towards building your own argument. Now, here's an example from a recent publication of my own. So this paper is coming out hopefully in January of 2021. And in it, I'm doing one of the things that I mentioned on the last slide. I'm taking a really large body of critical literature, all these people who have been writing critical stuff about applied phenomenology and saying that it's not any good, or it's really weak, or no one should care about it, it's a waste of time, and so on. There's a lot of people who are criticizing applied phenomenology, and I'm taking that entire literature and then I boil it down to this one simple argument. Okay, so here's premise one of the argument. If applied phenomenology offers nothing but first-person descriptions of experience, then it offers nothing distinctive, and we should study the experiential dimension by other means. Premise two, if applied phenomenology involves the kind of analysis characteristic of classical phenomenology, then its analyses are only of interest to a small group of philosophers, and we should study the experiential dimension by other means. Either applied phenomenology offers nothing but first-person descriptions of experience, or it involves the kind of analysis characteristic of classical phenomenology. Conclusion, therefore, we should study the experiential dimension by other means. So again, this argument took me a little bit of time to get through it, right? But this summarizes about 30 to 35 papers that are all kind of making more or less the same set of criticisms against applied phenomenology. So you have a bunch of people who are saying, look, there's no reason we should mess around with all this complicated phenomenological terminology. We can just do qualitative psychology. So it's just first-person descriptions. Why bother with fancy phenomenology? And then you have other people saying, look, phenomenology is this weird philosophical discipline where people do transcendental philosophy. How could that be of interest to anybody outside a small group of philosophy conferences? And so you put that really significant literature together in the form of one single argument that functions as a dilemma, and the conclusion of which is we should stop working on applied phenomenology. So I use this, again, like I said, you can use argument reconstructions to structure an entire paper. So I built my most recent publication around this argument. And I respond to it and I say, well, first I show that the dilemma works against a lot of the sort of popular applied phenomenological work that's been done. And then I try to articulate a position that doesn't get sort of taken out of commission by either horn of this dilemma. So once I had this little argument reconstruction to work with, I could build an entire paper around it. And that's effectively what I did. So just to show you this, the structure of that argument that I just gave you, it works like this. It's a very simple, valid argument. It says, if A, then B, if C, then B, either A or C, therefore B, right? And those three little dots, that just means therefore. So that's the logical structure of the argument I gave. And that's another thing that's really useful about reconstructing arguments, is that what you reveal when you reconstruct them is the logical form of the argument. So usually when you're reading a paper and a philosopher is making an argument, they haven't laid it out in these terms for you. The process of argument is more intuitive and you're just kind of following the premises along. But when you reconstruct an argument in this sort of standardized form, you try to fit it to a valid logical form. And then you know that if the premises are true, then the conclusion is true. And that's a very useful thing to do as well.